My grandfather served in the Ardennes in the winter of 1944. He came home in 1945 with a Bronze Star, a piece of shrapnel still in his shoulder, and a silence that lasted 40 years. The night before he died, he told me everything. He was 91 years old. The doctors had given him 3 days. He'd already outlasted them by 2. I was alone with him in the room. The hallway was quiet. The machines were quiet. He turned his head toward me, slowly, the way a man turns when every movement costs him something, and he said, "I want to tell you about the forest. I never told anyone about the forest." I leaned closer. This is what he said. I was 19 when they drafted me. I'd never been outside Pennsylvania. I'd never seen the ocean. I trained at Camp Wheeler in Georgia for 16 weeks. Then they put me on a troop ship in November of 44. 42 of us in a compartment built for 24. The man in the bunk above me was seasick for 9 days straight. When we landed in Le Havre, the war was supposed to be almost over. Paris had been liberated in August. The Germans were retreating across the Rhine. The men in my unit talked about being home by Christmas. Some of them had already mailed their winter coats back. I was assigned as a replacement to the 28th Infantry Division. The Bloody Bucket. They'd been chewed up in the Hurtgen Forest a few weeks earlier. We were sent to a quiet sector in Belgium to rest and refit, a place called the Ardennes. We dug foxholes along the Schnee-Eifel Ridge. The ground was frozen so hard we used pickaxes for 2 days before we could shovel. By the second night, my hands were bleeding inside my gloves, and I didn't notice until I took them off. The forest was beautiful. I remember thinking that. Tall pines, snow on every branch. No sound except our own footsteps. You could hear a man cough from 100 yards away. The veterans in my squad said it was the easiest sector in the entire line. They called it the Ghost Front. Some of them hadn't seen a German in 3 weeks. They taught me the things they'd learned. How to keep the bolt of an M1 Garand from freezing. How to thaw a K ration on my chest before I tried to eat it. How to sleep in a foxhole without losing toes to frostbite. How to recognize the sound of an incoming 88 in time to drop. I wrote a letter to my mother on December the 15th. I told her I was warm. I told her I'd be home by spring. I told her not to worry. I sealed the envelope. I never sent it. The next morning, the forest came apart. I was on watch at 5:30 in the morning on December the 16th. It was still dark. The temperature was 8 below zero. The fog was so thick, I couldn't see the foxhole next to mine. I heard the artillery before I saw it. A single, distant boom. Then another. Then the entire sky to the east turned orange. The man in my foxhole said one word: run. The German barrage walked through our sector for 90 minutes. I counted shells until I lost count somewhere past 300. The trees above us shattered. Pieces of pine, the size of fence posts, came down like spears. A man could be killed by a tree as easily as by a shell. When the artillery stopped, the silence was worse. We knew what was coming. Through the fog, we heard engines, tanks, the deep grinding sound of tigers moving through the snow, and then the buzzsaw. The German MG-42. 1,200 rounds a minute. It doesn't sound like a weapon, that gun. It sounds like canvas tearing in a wind tunnel. Our lieutenant gave one order. He said it twice, calmly, like he was telling us to pass the salt. Fall back to the road. Fall back to the road. We didn't make it to the road. There were 6 of us when we left the foxholes. There were 3 of us by the time we crossed the first creek. I never saw the others fall. I just turned around at one point, and they weren't there anymore. The forest had taken them. The corporal in front of me had a compass. He said we needed to go west. We went west for 2 days. The forest was full of Germans. We heard them at night. They sang sometimes, German songs, around fires we couldn't see. They were close enough that we could smell their cigarettes on the wind. We didn't speak. We didn't light fires. We ate snow and the last of our K rations frozen. The corporal had a wound on his leg that he wouldn't let us look at. On the second night, we hid in the roots of a fallen pine. A German patrol passed within 20 feet of us. 6 men. They had a dog. The dog stopped. It turned its head. It looked at the tree. One of the soldiers called it. The dog hesitated. Then it followed. I have thought about that dog every winter for 60 years. I don't know why it didn't bark. I don't know if it didn't smell us, or if it did and chose not to. I would like to believe it chose. On the 3rd morning, we found a road. The corporal couldn't walk anymore. His leg had turned black above the boot. He told us to leave him. He said he'd cover the road if Germans came down it. We argued with him. He didn't argue back. He just sat down against a tree, took out his rifle, and started cleaning it like we weren't there. We left him a clip of ammunition and our last 3 cigarettes. He gave me the compass and a folded letter. He asked me to mail it to his wife if I made it home. Her name was Eleanor. She lived in Trenton, New Jersey. I never asked what was in the letter. I sent it from a post office in Liège 6 weeks later, with a note saying I was sorry for the delay. We didn't hear any shots from his direction that day. I don't know if that's good or bad. I have never known. On the 4th day, just before sunset, we walked into a roadblock manned by the 82nd Airborne. They almost shot us. We hadn't shaved in a week. Our uniforms were torn. We didn't have helmets. I'd lost mine somewhere on the first morning. The sergeant on the roadblock made us recite the lyrics to a popular song before he lowered his rifle. The song was "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree." I knew the words. The other man didn't. They believed us anyway. They gave us coffee. Real coffee. Hot. The first warm thing I'd had in 5 days. I held the metal cup with both hands, and I couldn't feel my fingers. One of the medics looked at me and asked where I was from. I tried to say Pennsylvania. I started crying instead. I cried for a long time, standing there with the cup in my hands, and I couldn't stop. The medic just stood next to me and let me. He didn't ask any more questions. I have always remembered that about him. He didn't ask any more questions. Of the 400 men in my company, 83 came home. I went back to Pennsylvania in the summer of '45. I married your grandmother in '47. I worked at the steel mill in Bethlehem for 41 years. I never owned a gun. I never went hunting. I never went back to Europe, even when your grandmother wanted to. I never told your father any of this. I never told your grandmother any of this. But you asked me once, when you were 12, what the Bronze Star was for. I told you it was for nothing. I told you they handed them out like candy. I lied. I'm sorry, son. I should have told you sooner. He died the next morning, just before dawn. I have his Zippo on my desk. I light it once a year, on December the 16th, and I let it burn for as long as he was on the ridge before the artillery started. 5 hours and 30 minutes. Then I close it. I put it back in its place, and I think about a corporal whose name I'll never know alone on a road in Belgium with one rifle, one clip of ammunition, and 3 cigarettes.